When Joe Biden left the White House in January 2025, he walked back into a three-bedroom house in Delaware. Just 3 bedrooms. The entire place is 6,850 square feet. Now, before you think that sounds impressive, wait until you hear what other presidents owned. We're talking about 33-room mansions on 5,000 acres. Oceanfront compounds worth more than some people make in 10 lifetimes. Estates so massive they had their own names that are still famous today. But here's what nobody's talking about. Biden's entire real estate portfolio, both homes combined, is worth $6.2 million. Some presidents spent more than that on a single vacation property. One president's single estate is worth almost 100 times more than everything Biden owns. So here's the question that changes everything. Is Joe Biden actually one of the most modest real estate owners to ever hold the presidency? The answer is going to surprise you. And the viral mansion everyone thinks he owns? That story is even more interesting. Let's dive in. What Biden actually owns and the mansion he doesn't. The Greenville house sits on a lake in Delaware. It's quiet, it's private, and it's been the center of some of the most important moments in Biden's life. But the story of how this house came to be tells you everything you need to know about the man who built it. Back in 1996, Joe Biden did something unusual for a senator. He didn't buy a mansion. He bought empty land. 4 acres of lakefront property in Greenville, a quiet suburb of Wilmington, for $350,000. Then he built his own house from scratch. The result was a 6,850 square foot home with just 3 bedrooms and 4.5 bathrooms. The layout wasn't about showing off. It was about comfort. It was about family. This house became more than just a residence. During his vice presidency, Biden rented out a small cottage on the property to the Secret Service for $2,200 a month so they could protect him while he was home. And in this house, in that garage everyone now knows about, Biden keeps his prized 1967 Corvette Stingray. But the garage also became the center of a political storm when classified documents were discovered there in 2022, turning a family home into a national news story overnight. The most heartbreaking moment connected to this house came when Biden's son Beau was battling brain cancer. The medical bills were mounting. Biden, who had been called the poorest member of Congress for decades, seriously considered taking a second mortgage on this house to pay for his son's treatment. When he shared this with President Barack Obama, Obama immediately told him not to do it. Obama offered to lend Biden the money himself. That gesture says everything about the bond between those two men, and it says everything about Biden's financial situation at the time. Today, this house is estimated to be worth $1.7 million. Not bad for a property that started as empty land. But compared to what's coming, this is pocket change. Then there's the beach house. In the summer of 2017, after Biden left the vice presidency, he and Jill finally realized a dream they'd had for decades. They bought a home on the Delaware shore in Rehoboth Beach for $2.7 million. This wasn't some massive compound. It was a 4,800 square foot, 3-story house with 6 bedrooms. But what made it special was what it represented. Biden said it himself when they bought it. Throughout their careers, he and Jill had dreamed of being able to buy a place at the beach where they could bring the whole family. This wasn't an investment property. This wasn't about building wealth. It was about having a place where everyone could gather. The house has expansive porches overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, an outdoor kitchen with a built-in barbecue, and even a fireplace for cool evenings. It's designed for entertaining, for family, for memories. The current estimated value? $4.4 million. So let's do the math. The Greenville house at $1.7 million, plus the Rehoboth Beach house at $4.4 million, gives us a total portfolio value of $6.1 million. Rounded up to $6.2 million with some property appreciation. That's what Joe Biden owns in real estate. But here's where the story gets really interesting. There's this photo that went viral during the 2020 election. A massive, sprawling mansion with formal gardens and columns. Eric Trump shared it on social media with a caption implying Biden lived in this palatial estate while claiming to be middle-class Joe. The problem? Biden hasn't owned that house since 1996. That's 28 years ago. The real story of that mansion is actually fascinating. Back in 1974, when Biden was a young senator and a recent widower after losing his first wife and daughter in a car accident, he bought a former DuPont mansion in Greenville for $185,000. But here's the thing. The house was abandoned. It was slated for demolition. It was a wreck. Biden spent the next 21 years living in that house while renovating it piece by piece. He nicknamed it the Station and used it as his campaign headquarters during his first presidential run in 1988. The 10,000-square-foot mansion had 5 bedrooms, formal gardens, and a pool. By the time he finished the renovations and sold it in 1996, he got $1.2 million for it. That was more than 6 times what he paid, and it shows Biden knew his way around a real estate investment. But the key detail everyone misses? He sold it in 1996 to an executive at MBNA Bank. He hasn't owned it in nearly 3 decades. Yet that image still circulates online, misleading millions of people into thinking Biden lives in some massive mansion. The truth is far more modest. And compared to what other presidents have owned, it's almost boring. So if Biden's real estate portfolio totals $6.2 million and consists of 2 family homes in Delaware, how does that stack up against the rest of presidential history? Buckle up, because we're about to take a journey through some of the most incredible estates ever owned by American presidents. The Presidential Real Estate Hall of Fame. Let's start where it all began, with the Founding Fathers. These men weren't just creating a country, they were building empires. George Washington owned Mount Vernon, an 11,000-square-foot mansion sitting on 8,000 acres of prime Virginia land. When you adjust for inflation and property values today, we're talking about a $50 million estate, minimum. Washington was one of the wealthiest presidents in American history, and his home proved it. The mansion itself had sweeping views of the Potomac River, and the property generated income from farming and other enterprises. This wasn't just a home. It was a working estate that symbolized power and success. Then there's Thomas Jefferson and his beloved Monticello. This wasn't just a house. It was an architectural masterpiece. 33 rooms spreading across 11,000 square feet, sitting on 5,000 acres of Virginia countryside. Jefferson designed much of it himself, and historians estimate that in today's dollars, Monticello and the surrounding property would be worth over $200 million. The irony? Jefferson died deeply in debt despite owning this incredible wealth, showing that even founding fathers struggled with money management. James Madison took it even further. His estate, Montpelier, eventually grew to 22,000 square feet after multiple expansions. It sat on 5,000 acres and would be worth tens of millions today. These founding fathers weren't just political leaders. They were landed gentry, aristocrats who owned more wealth than most Americans could imagine. But let's jump forward to the 20th century, because that's when presidential real estate really started to get interesting. Franklin D. Roosevelt inherited Springwood, a massive estate in Hyde Park, New York. The property featured 49 rooms spread across vast acreage. It was a family estate passed down through generations, and in today's market, it would easily command $30 million or more. FDR never had to build his wealth. It was given to him by birth. John F. Kennedy grew up surrounded by wealth, and the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, became legendary. The main house alone is over 9,000 square feet of oceanfront perfection. But it wasn't just one house. The Kennedy family owned multiple properties in the compound, creating a family retreat that collectively would be worth well over $100 million today. The compound still belongs to the Kennedy family, a testament to generational wealth that most Americans will never experience. Ronald Reagan loved his Rancho del Cielo, a 688-acre ranch in California that he called his Western White House. He bought it in 1974 for $527,000, and today it would be worth somewhere between $5 and $10 million. Reagan found peace there, away from the pressures of Washington, and the ranch became synonymous with his presidency. George W. Bush's Prairie Chapel Ranch in Crawford, Texas, spans 1,583 acres. Interestingly, the main house is only about 4,000 square feet, which is surprisingly modest by presidential standards. Bush purchased the property in 1999 for $1.3 million, and current estimates put it between $4 and $6 million. Here's where it gets interesting. Bush's real estate portfolio is actually comparable to Biden's. Both men hover around the $6 million mark. Both chose relatively modest primary residences focused on family rather than showing off. Then we get to Barack Obama, and the contrast becomes stark. Before his presidency, Obama lived in a modest home in Chicago. Nothing spectacular. But after leaving office, Obama purchased an $8.1 million estate on Martha's Vineyard. The property spans 6,892 square feet on 29 acres of oceanfront paradise. And that's not all. Obama also owns a mansion in Washington, D.C. worth about $5 million with 8,200 square feet. Added up, and Obama's post-presidency real estate portfolio is worth at least $13 million. That's more than double what Biden owns. But all of this pales in comparison to what comes next. Donald Trump isn't just a president who owned real estate. He built an empire on it. Mar-a-Lago alone is estimated to be worth somewhere between $300 and $500 million. The estate features 126 rooms and 62,500 square feet of pure luxury. Then there's his Trump Tower penthouse in Manhattan, valued at over $100 million. Multiple golf courses with residential properties attached. The Seven Springs Estate in New York with over 50,000 square feet. His Bedminster Golf Club residence in New Jersey. When you add it all up, Trump's real estate portfolio isn't measured in millions. It's measured in billions, though much of it is heavily leveraged with debt. Still, the sheer scale of Trump's holdings makes every other modern president look modest by comparison. Biden's $6.2 million portfolio, it's less than 2% of what Trump's Mar-a-Lago alone is worth. So where does this leave us? Let's break down the rankings. When you line up all the presidents and rank them by real estate wealth adjusted for inflation, the hierarchy becomes crystal clear. At the very top, in the ultra-luxury tier worth over $100 million, you've got Donald Trump in a category all by himself with billions in holdings. Then come the historical giants. Thomas Jefferson with Monticello valued at over $200 million in today's money. George Washington with Mount Vernon worth at least $100 million. Herbert Hoover, who was a self-made millionaire before entering politics, with about $80 million in adjusted wealth. The upper tier, ranging from $20 million to $100 million, includes Franklin D. Roosevelt at around $60 million, John F. Kennedy and the Kennedy compound at over $100 million when you factor in family holdings, and James Madison with Montpelier at about $50 million. Then we hit the middle tier, $5 million to $20 million. This is where things get interesting. Barack Obama sits here comfortably at $13 million with his two post-presidency estates. George H.W. Bush owned about $15 million worth of property during his lifetime. James Monroe, adjusted for inflation, probably owned about $10 million in real estate wealth. And then we get to what I'm calling the modest tier. This is $1 million to $5 million in real estate holdings. Bill Clinton, after his presidency, bought properties worth about $11 million total. Jimmy Carter, who remained incredibly modest throughout and after his presidency, probably owned between $2 and $3 million in real estate. George W. Bush, as we mentioned, sits around $6 million with his Texas ranch. And right there, nestled in the modest tier, is Joe Biden at $6.2 million. Let that sink in for a moment. Biden ranks in the bottom third of all presidents when it comes to real estate wealth. His entire portfolio is less than Obama's single Martha's Vineyard property. Trump's Mar-a-Lago alone is worth 50 to 80 times everything Biden owns combined. Even when you adjust historical properties for inflation, Biden owns less than many presidents who served 200 years ago. So why is Biden's real estate portfolio so modest compared to other presidents? The answer reveals a lot about his life story. Biden never inherited wealth. He wasn't born into a family like the Kennedys or the Roosevelts or the Bushes. His father struggled financially, and Biden grew up solidly middle class in Scranton, Pennsylvania, then Delaware. When he started his political career, he was a young senator making a decent salary, but nothing that would build generational wealth. He spent 36 years as a senator. Senate salaries are good, they're comfortable, but they're not wealth-building salaries, especially if you're raising a family and dealing with personal tragedy. Biden lost his first wife and daughter in 1972. He was raising two young sons while commuting to Washington by train every day. There wasn't money left over for real estate speculation. Then came 8 years as vice president, where he earned $230,000 annually. Again, comfortable, but not wealthy. The real money didn't come until after Biden left the vice presidency in 2017. That's when the book deals hit. That's when the speaking fees came in. Between 2017 and 2019, Biden earned about $17 million from book deals and paid speeches. That's what allowed him to buy the beach house. That's what built the financial cushion. But here's the crucial difference between Biden and many other presidents. He didn't invest heavily in real estate as a wealth-building strategy. He bought two homes where his family could live and gather. They're primary residences, not investment properties. There's no portfolio of vacation homes across multiple states. No luxury estates in Aspen or Hawaii or Martha's Vineyard. Just two houses in Delaware, the state he's called home for over 60 years. Compare that to Trump, who built an entire business empire on real estate speculation and luxury development. Compare it to Obama, who bought prestigious properties in two of the most expensive markets in America. Compare it to the Founding Fathers, who owned thousands of acres and hundreds of enslaved people to work that land. Biden's real estate story is remarkably restrained. And in a country where presidential wealth often signals success, it raises an interesting question. What does modest real estate say about a president's priorities? There's always been a tension in American politics around presidential wealth. On one hand, Americans want their presidents to be successful. We want leaders who have achieved something, who understand business and economics, who can relate to the American dream of building wealth and security. On the other hand, we're suspicious of presidents who are too wealthy, too disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people. Biden's real estate portfolio walks that tightrope almost perfectly. At $6.2 million in real estate, Biden owns about 17 times what the average American home is worth, which currently sits around $350,000. That's significant wealth by any measure. But compared to other presidents, who often owned 100 to 1,000 times the average American's wealth, Biden is remarkably closer to normal. The post-presidency money machine has changed the game entirely. Bill Clinton made over $200 million in speaking fees after leaving office. Obama made $65 million from book deals alone. These men became wealthy not through inheritance or business empires, but through their presidential legacies. Biden followed the same path, earning $17 million in the 2 years after leaving the vice presidency. But here's what's fascinating. Even with that influx of money, Biden didn't go on a real estate buying spree. He bought one beach house in Delaware, the place he's always called home. That choice reveals priorities. It reveals values. Jimmy Carter famously remained incredibly modest after his presidency, focusing on humanitarian work with Habitat for Humanity rather than cashing in on speaking fees and book deals. His real estate portfolio stayed small. Biden falls somewhere between Carter's extreme modesty and Obama's post-presidency luxury. He earned the money, bought a nice beach house for his family, and called it a day. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, that viral mansion photo. The fact that a 28-year-old real estate transaction still gets weaponized in political attacks tells you everything about how Americans view presidential wealth. People want to believe that politicians are secretly living in massive mansions while claiming to represent the middle class, and sometimes they are. But in Biden's case, the truth is far more mundane. He bought a fixer-upper mansion in 1974 for $185,000. He spent 2 decades renovating it while living there with his family. He sold it in 1996 for $1.2 million, making a profit that any real estate investor would be proud of. Then he moved into a smaller, newer house that he built himself. That's not a story of secret wealth or deception. That's a story of smart real estate investment and downsizing as life circumstances changed. But the photo persists because it fits a narrative. It confirms what people want to believe about politicians living large while regular Americans struggle. The reality that Biden sold that house nearly 3 decades ago doesn't matter to people who have already decided what they want to believe. And that brings us to the final comparison that really matters. Biden's 2 Delaware homes, totaling $6.2 million, represent a lifetime of work and some late-career financial success. They're comfortable, they're nice, they're on waterfronts with good views, but they're not palatial, they're not compounds. They're not estates that require full-time staff and groundskeepers. Thomas Jefferson built Monticello as a monument to himself, a physical representation of his genius and vision. Trump built luxury properties designed to broadcast wealth and power. The Founding Fathers built estates that established them as landed aristocracy. Biden built 2 houses in Delaware where he could be with his family. That difference in approach says more about presidential priorities than any policy position ever could. Some presidents see real estate as a legacy, a statement, an empire. Biden sees it as a place to come home to. So after looking at centuries of presidential properties, from Washington's Mount Vernon to Trump's Mar-a-Lago, where does Biden really stand? The numbers don't lie. Joe Biden owns the 11th or 12th most modest real estate portfolio of any American president, depending on how you calculate and adjust for inflation. His $6.2 million in holdings puts him well below the presidential average. He owns less than Obama, less than both Bushes, less than Kennedy, less than most founding fathers when you adjust their holdings to modern values. The only presidents more modest than Biden are people like Jimmy Carter, who deliberately avoided building wealth after his presidency, and some earlier presidents who served in eras where real estate values were fundamentally different. But here's what makes Biden's story unique. He had the opportunity to build a much larger real estate portfolio. After leaving the vice presidency, he earned $17 million in just 2 years. He could have bought properties in multiple states. He could have invested in luxury real estate markets. He could have built a collection of homes like other presidents did. He chose not to. Instead, he bought one beach house in the state he's always called home and stayed in the lakefront house he built in the 1990s. That's it. That's the empire. 2 properties, both in Delaware, both designed for family gatherings rather than investment returns. When you compare Biden's real estate to the 33-room mansions, the 50,000 square foot estates, and the billion-dollar portfolios owned by other presidents, his holdings look almost boring. And maybe that's exactly the point. Presidential real estate reveals presidential values. Jefferson valued grand architectural statements. Washington valued land and agricultural production. Kennedy valued family compounds that would last generations. Trump values luxury brands and gold-plated everything. Biden values going home to Delaware. After 36 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president and 4 years as president, Joe Biden will return to a 3-bedroom house on a lake in Wilmington. He'll spend weekends at his beach house down the shore. He'll have family gatherings and barbecues in his outdoor kitchen. He'll probably still keep that Corvette in the garage. It's not the biggest presidential real estate story. It's not the most impressive. It won't make headlines or spark viral social media posts, except for that mansion he sold 28 years ago that people still think he owns. But it might be the most relatable presidential real estate story in modern American history. And in a country where the gap between presidential wealth and average American wealth keeps growing, maybe that's worth something. So the next time you see that viral mansion photo, remember this. Joe Biden sold that house in 1996. What he actually owns is far more modest. And compared to centuries of presidential properties, from sprawling plantations to billion-dollar estates, Biden's 2 Delaware homes represent something different. They represent a president who, despite decades at the highest levels of power, never quite lost sight of home. And that might be the real story worth telling.